We could work in the ring. We could do the promos. We had the personalities, the gimmick, the personas, We had it all. I said, go in the corner. This doesn't concern you. It's me and him. I could say that was probably a prelude to the UFC now. But it was a fist fight. It ended his career. I said, my dad, why is he still wrestling? He says, because he's broke. I had sworn to myself, I'm not going to end up like that. You got drawn into something that you didn't ask for, but you can't get out of. Otherwise, you're going to be walked on like a carpet. You have to redeem the respect. I told Jacques the next day, I said, there has to be a receipt. And I said, either you do it or I'm going to do it.
Hey, everybody, welcome once again to Prime Time with Sean Mooney. And I want to get right to it. I have a very special guest joining me here. He was part of one of the most successful tag teams ever in the history of the World Wrestling Federation, or the WWE as we know it today. But there is so much more to his story. And honestly, I'll tell you up front, he was one of the most respected and great people that were involved in the World Wrestling Federation for me. And I am just so honored to have him come on and have a conversation. Folks, welcome Raymond Rougeau. Ray, thanks so much for coming on. How are you?
Sean, it's a pleasure. It's been too long.
Yes, yes, it has. And I said there's so much to your story because it's just incredible. If people have ever taken the time to really find out about your life, you started this journey really when you were 16. You come from a family that has a rich history in professional wrestling, but you, from the very beginning, had other dreams as well, besides fulfilling all these others in the ring. But looking back now, and before we really got started here, you mentioned that you're now in your 70s. You've got to think, man, what a ride it has been.
Incredible ride. And just to bring a precision, 71, early 70s.
Early 70s.
But yes, an incredible ride. I mean, who would have thought, starting from when I was training at 13 years old to become a wrestler, then, having a fantastic career as a wrestler, then becoming an announcer for WWE, commentator, interviewer, play-by-play, English, French. Who would have thought? And then after that, going into politics, who would have thought? Because I never had an inclination for politics. It just happened.
Yeah, and you also had all these other things going on, a pilot, and you started, wisely early in your career, investing in yourself and in real estate. And we'll get into that because to me, that's a whole other part of people's lives. And we don't hear a lot of these success stories of people that go into, really any sports that are thinking ahead. But I really want to begin because it makes up so much of who you are from where you came from and the family of Rougeaus that were involved in professional wrestling, not just in the ring, but also on the business side and promotions, and especially your father, Jacques, who I know had a big influence on you. So early on, how did that really just kind of lay the foundation of who you became?
My dad and I were always best friends. I was the first child in the family. We're 5 children. I was the oldest. I was the first one, and I was a boy. So my dad was happy to have a boy. He dragged me around with him all the time. He used to work out because he wrestled. So being a kid, I wanted to do like my dad. So when he was working out, I said, "Oh, can I come and work out with you?" So I was doing little stuff. And at the age of 13, my dad also was he was a boxer when he was young. He won the Golden Gloves championship. When I was a kid, he taught me how to box. Not to be a troublemaker, to look for trouble, but he says if ever trouble is there and you can't avoid it, you will be able to deal with it. And so I started working out with him. He asked me one day, I was 13 years old. He says, did you ever consider wanting to become a wrestler one day? And I was like, no, because 13, I'm a little skinny kid. And I'm looking at these guys, I never thought of being in the ring with some of these guys. You don't think of that when
Well,
you're 13
you
years
didn't
old.
know it was a work either, right?
I didn't.
Yeah.
And so my dad says, well, he says, you know, if you wanted to, he says, I could train you. And he says, if you listen to what I say and you do what I tell you to do, he says, when you're 16 years old, you'll have your first professional match. So he says, would you want to do it? And I could see in his eyes, he would have wished for a yes for an answer.
Yeah.
And then what kid does not want to please his parent or his father? So I said, yeah, sure. Never thinking it would, materialize. So I started training with him, and he started training me seriously at 13 years old, and building a body. So I started working out on weights a lot and training, and he'd wrestle with me and stuff. But a year and a half before I started, he got me into a gym in Montreal, and it was private for me. I don't know if you remember an old timer, Luigi Macera.
Masetta, yeah.
Yeah, well, he was wrestling in Montreal. My uncle hired him to train me. He
Hmm.
was a guy that had a lot of experience. He taught me the basics of wrestling. So Luigi trained me. My dad came. He always brought me. I didn't have a driver's license at 14 years old and
Yeah.
15 years old. He'd drive me there. He'd spend the time working out while I was in the ring. He got in the ring with me. So I was in the ring 3 days a week for 3 hours a day, besides working out, training on weights, building my body. I did exactly what my dad told me to and more. And at the age of 16 years and 3 months, I had my first match.
Your first man. That's just amazing. And we know what
I
went
was
on
still
from
in high
there.
school. I was
Ah,
still in high school.
yeah. But it goes much deeper than that as far as, that relationship with your father, because I think it's so important about who you are. I know that, honor and respect is just in your soul. That kind of that made your whole life as far as how you dealt with people and situations. And maybe it was the road of professional wrestling that took you there and was your father's path. But he seems to me to have been, I think, back then you may have called him like a man's man. To him, it was
Yeah.
your word is your honor. That
Yeah.
you have to respect others. If someone disrespects you, they've got to have a receipt for it. And that really kind of made up who you are. So tell me a little bit more about who he was and how that was kind of drilled into the whole family. Of course, you and Jacques, but I've listened to other interviews and you talk about him, and to me that's what really comes through because I know it shaped your whole life and it was how
Yeah.
you approached everything
Yeah.
from that point.
Well, my dad, like you mentioned, was a man of honor, a man of his word. He was a guy that was very respected in the business, very respected here as a person who can take care of himself,
Hmm.
but as a guy that never looked for trouble, never, I mean, he never was an instigator or anything. He was just a nice guy, quiet guy. If there are 20 guys in the room, he's not the guy you're going to hear.
Yeah.
He's the quiet guy and this and that, but very respected. Everybody knew he could hold his own. In our business, unfortunately, occasionally you have to put your foot down and
Yeah,
command
back
respect.
then.
But he was so respected. I remember Abdullah the Butcher when I was younger. He used to tell me, he says, Raymond, he says, your dad, he's a great guy, but he's a very dangerous man. He says, I wouldn't cross your dad. Abdullah told me that, other guys. His reputation preceded him, let's say. I went with him to Japan in 1975. I was 20 years old. Him and I were on a tour in Japan, 2 months there with Antonio Inoki's New Japan Pro Wrestling back then. Wrestling was like a work but half shoot back then in Japan.
Oh
You know,
yeah.
you didn't go in and talk to the guys before and call the shots. I said you went in and you could almost say it was a fight for your life back then. You knew
Yeah.
who was going over, but that's about it. The rest, well, good luck. And one night, it was funny, there was a Japanese wrestler, he paid a little took a little liberties on my dad or something, a little stiff. So he was a guy that was used to that. His name was Shibata back then. Anyways, my dad gave him a receipt, knocked him out cold. I mean, one right to the chin. He was on his back. Referee says, "Oh, you hit Japanese boy too hard." But it was just he commanded respect. you know. He taught that to me, and he taught me a lot of values in life. You know, there was fun, you know, you're talking about investments and starting young and this and that. You're not born, I think, with the natural ability to think about investing when you're a kid and a teenager. It has to be taught to you. When I started in the business, I'm sitting in the dressing room with people that I had idolized when I was younger. I was in the dressing room with Edward Carpentier, Maurice Mad Dog Vachon, Joe LeDuc. You know, I'm looking at all these guys, but some of them had a hard time walking, you know, and I'm 16 years old. I'm not sure anywhere. I mean, you know, I'm a kid. And I asked my dad, I said, I can see him having a hard time getting up from the bench and he's going out to wrestle. I said, my dad, why is he still wrestling? He says, because he's broke. He doesn't have a dime. He has to go wrestle to feed himself. Sean, I don't think if you would have hit me over the head with a sledgehammer, it would have done any more damage. That hit me, it knocked me out. At that point, I just turned 16 years old. I had sworn to myself, I'm not going to end up like that, you know. And and I knew my dad had a good mind for business, and he had me buy my first piece of property, which is on the waterfront property, St. Lawrence River. It was a vacant lot. Back in 1972, I was 17 years old. Back then, 1972, that small piece of lot with nothing on it cost me $17,500. I didn't have it. I had what it was about $6,000 saved up, which was a lot of money back then when you're 16, 17 years old, you know. And my grandmother lent me the rest. She financed me, and she says, you're going to pay interest the same rate the bank pays. I'm 17 years old. I said, sure. She says, I want to teach you business. That's business. So I paid my grandmother the interest and the payments. And back then I was looking, man, I'm in debt for $11,000 to her, $12,000 to her. I wasn't making money when I just started the business, you know. And I'm like, I'll never get that paid off. Well, I sacrificed so much that, you know, the guys after the matches go eat at the restaurant or whatever, you know. I brought a lunch because I was living at home. I was paying, and my dad said, you start your first match, you're starting to pay board at home. $10 a week, you're going to start paying from now on. But I was only wrestling for a couple of months in the summer. I was going back in school. Tough. You started to work, you're going to pay board. Okay, so I have $10 a week to pay at home now, you know. And so I'd bring a lunch from home. I wouldn't go spend in the restaurant. I saved up. Just so you know, in a year and a half, I'd paid off that land. And it was clear. And then I sold it for double what I paid for it. I sold it for $35,000. So now I'm 19 years old. I'd saved up a little money. I had $35,000 back in 1974, you know. Then I turned around 6 months later, bought 2 6-unit apartment buildings, used that as a down payment, you know. And because my dad and I were supposed to each buy one, the 6-unit apartment buildings. At the end, he says, I'll let you buy both. I'm like, and back then it cost me $130,000 for those 2 buildings, which today is nothing. It's the down payment on a car. No, but I mean, back then, 130,000 back in 1975 was a hell of a lot of money when you're 20 years old. And I'm looking at it, I'll be in debt for the rest of my life. He explained what income property was. It's not a debt, it's an investment. You're going to collect rents, it's going to pay off. He said, and I was still scared because I just saw it as a big debt. He says, Raymond, do you trust me? I said, yes. He says, have faith. Believe me, I won't steer you wrong. I went in. Best move I ever made, you know? So I bought that. And then after that, it snowballed and just kept buying, you know. But that's how I got in. I looked and I said, I don't want to end up like what I was seeing in the dressing room, you know?
Yeah, that's really amazing though to have that kind of awareness at that age because we've seen so many and you know I know Jacques didn't listen. I mean I know you tried with him, but it's really incredible that you were able to do that. The other thing that really
I tried to give him advice.
Oh, I know. He told me that and he's just like, you know, everything's going to be fine. Everything's going to work. I'm going to always have this money coming in. He was just
He's at peace
But
with it now. He's at peace with it now.
I know, and now he's got a new piece of property he told me
Yeah,
about, so that's
yeah,
good. He finally got his place on the water,
yeah,
so that's great. But the other thing that really stands out about you to me, and I remember back in the day with the WWF is, I remember coming in and meeting you guys, and you couldn't have been nicer to me. And I was an outsider. I did not come from the business. I was green as you could possibly be.
yeah,
And it was still old school. It was the old West still, where we had, it was kayfabe, and you really had to earn your way in, and especially from somebody who didn't come from that. And we still had a lot of the, generational wrestlers coming in, and then we also had people that were coming from the outside. And you guys were awesome to me. And I just remember, I was very close to Lord Alfred Hayes, and I remember him telling me about you guys, and he said, you see Raymond. He goes, he's one of the toughest guys in this business. And I was like, well, he just seems so nice and everything. He said, yeah, till you mess with him, in his own way that Alfred would say, until you cross him, and then it becomes a problem. But that, was so true about you that like no one would know, but there was kind of this word, this respect around there that people said, yeah, but don't mess with him. And that didn't come just by people talking. I know that you at times had to, you know, prove that, not necessarily wanting to, but I know I know a story of a guy messing with your younger brother Armand, and you
yeah.
taking care of it.
It
But
was
that was right
that
part
was
of the
it.
business.
Yeah, that's what the business was back then, And that guy was Zadinoff LeBeuf.
Yeah.
He had wrestled in WWF back then as the Lumberjacks, I think. Big, he's a big guy. He's 260, 6'4". He had, let's say, taken advantage of my younger brother Arma that was just starting the business. He was upset because the promoters had booked him with him. He's not at that level. He should be in the ring with me. He beat him up. When my brother came back, he says, what happened? He said, I don't know. I asked the referee what happened there. And he told me, he says, is that enough? Was upset because they booked him with your brother. He didn't think he was at that level yet. Okay. So had to do what I had to do. 2 days later, his opponent wasn't there. Gino Brito, you know Gino?
No, but
No.
he was
Well,
the promoter. Yeah.
yeah, he was the promoter here in Montreal. I said, Gino, is that enough's opponent's not there? Put me with that enough. I said, I have something to settle with him. Gino said, I can't. You're working with Pat on the main event later on, Pat Patterson on the main event. I said, this is personal. You don't pay me for this. I said, this is personal. He was like, okay, like we used to call it, this is going to be a match for the boys. To bring it back, when I got into the ring, first thing I asked him, I said, well, first of all, the referee went to give the finish on the other side. Ray was going to go over. He said, we'll see. Okay. So we get into the ring. We get to the middle. So I look at him. I said, you were pretty tough with my brother the other night. He says, so what the F do you care? That I do. And I said, tonight, I'm going to be too tough for you. He says, we'll see. So, because he was a bouncer in the club also. He used to beat guys up in the club. And like I said, 6'4", 260. Used to really beat guys up. Before I went to the ring, Edward Carpazzi, you've heard of him.
Yeah, of course.
Edward and I were good friends. Before I went out, he says, Ray, be careful. He says, if he gets you down, he's going to cripple you. I said, oh, thank you, Edward, but he's got to take me down. And so I went out and I told him, you were tough, my brother. So I said, tonight I'm going to be too tough for you. He says, we'll see. Referee's looking. I said, go in the corner. This doesn't concern you. It's me and him. I could say that was probably a prelude to the UFC now, but it was a fist fight. It ended his career that night. He left. I mean, bloody, didn't mess up. He just went back because the heels, babyface, dressing rooms were separate. Abdullah was there. He still talks about it. If I cross him, he says, oh, that night you beat the crap out of Michael. He came in all bloodied, and anyways, so he just, after when it was done, he just staggered back. He went in, just took his things to back, left. He was never seen again. I was supposed to wrestle him the next night in Montreal. He never showed up. He never showed up again at a wrestling building, never wrestled again. He even moved from the province of Quebec down to the States, and he finished his life there and died down there. That ended his career. I think that, was talked about a lot because Pat was there. Pat Patterson saw it. And I remember, Pat had Louis,
Of course, yes. Yes.
Louis saw me the next night. He says, Louis was always a Pacific person.
Yeah.
He said, Raymond, I'm very disappointed in you.
Yeah.
I said, why? He says, from what you did last night. I said, well, Louis, that's up to you to deal with it. I did what I had to do to protect my brother. Thank you.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, and I can't imagine what that takes because, stepping in the ring and I mean, you're a good sized guy, but you're not 6'4", 260.
no.
How did you take him down? I mean, and a guy that was used to mixing it up.
Yeah. I used my speed. Actually, it was just I didn't take him down. I took him down with my fist, knocked him. It was more like you got the bare knuckle boxing now.
Yeah.
Well, it was basically a bare knuckle boxing match, a fight. He tried to kick me in the lower parts. I moved. I was quicker. I understood the science, like I said, the sweet science of fighting.
Yeah.
It's not just being going out and who you can hit each other until for one falls, the other one wins. No, if you can do the damage and not get damaged, you did your job right, which I did. I walked out, not a scratch on me, and he walked out pretty messed up.
With no career.
With no career left or nothing, But it was, like I said, a fist fight, and I was quicker. I was used to putting gloves on in boxing, so I was used to moving, and I don't know, and I was focused. I couldn't feel anything. He got me with one shot. I never even felt. Next day, I said, "Oh yeah, he did connect me here yesterday. Yeah, I forgot that. I felt it." But that was it. That was the only
That
thing.
was it?
The other thing, I had no space between the knuckles that were kind of evened out.
Well, and of course,
the
the most talked about situation with you guys when it comes to that, and I know it's been, you've had the conversation so many, many, many times of the encounter with the British Bulldogs, Tom Billington, Dynamite Kid. But the reason I did want to talk about it is because I don't know if people really understood what the world of professional wrestling was like back then. And it really was about, respect. And I think you've referred to it as before, as like, the prison yard in a sense that you can, it was old school, as I mentioned. And it wasn't like if you had an issue with somebody, you got into a room and you talked it out and you had a mediator or you went to Vince, and it was still very much old school. And there were, as you said, great guys involved, but it's like any other business. There are some people who have ego issues. Dynamite Kid was certainly one of those. I was around him. I saw the way he behaved. I stayed very clear of him because, it wasn't, we know what ribs are, and he was beyond that. It was often cruel and vicious and taking advantage of people who didn't have the same level of clout with the company. And so there were situations of bullying, and the only way that you settle it is you had to do it yourself. And I know in that situation, and I've had conversations with Jacques, that you guys were really pushed into a situation, especially Jacques, where he had to do something. Otherwise, in a sense, his career was over.
Well, I told Jacques that the night that happened, I was there.
Yeah.
The next day, for sure, you don't feel good when something like that happens. It's like now you got drawn into something that you didn't ask for, but you can't get out of. Otherwise, you're going to be walked on like a carpet. You have to redeem the respect. I told Jacques the next day. I said, there has to be a receipt, and I said, either you do it or I'm going to do it. But at that point, I don't know if you remember it, I had injured my leg. That was pretty nasty injury. It took about 9 months to be completely healed. But and it was like it had just happened weeks before, a couple of weeks before. So, and the business back then is, if you're not dead, you can go and work.
You get it, yeah.
Where now somebody who had an injury like I'd had, well, they'll be gone for 6 months and they'll have the doctors and physical therapy, this and that. Then when they're ready, they'll be back. I didn't miss one match. I left when that happened, the injury, I was in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Canada.
Yeah.
They put me in a wheelchair to get me on the plane. I had 3 days off and I was in Providence, Rhode Island, and I was at the show and I worked. But I mean, I couldn't bend my leg. I was going to the ring. The sweat was coming down from the pain. And I just went to the ring. I didn't get in. We worked it to where I didn't get into the ring, but I was there. But they wheelchaired me to the plane 2 days before, 3 days before, and now I'm in Providence. This happened like a week and a half later, so in Miami. So I told them, either you're going to do it or I'm going to do it. But I said, preferably it should be you. But I said, if not, it'll be me. But we're going to have to wait till I can stand up, you know.
Yeah.
So he says, I have to do it. I said, good, and I got your back. So we planned it. We got to where it happened, but there had to be a receipt. And it's, you know, when you look at it, some people could say, oh yeah, then you walk around, yeah, you feel good, yeah, yeah, mercy. No, it's an unfortunate situation that should not occur. That's something that should not happen. You know, now in society, you have harassment clauses in companies, and so you can't harass employees. That was heavy harassment. When you get punched in the face at the job, that's pretty heavy harassment, you know. But back then you had to deal with it, you know. So when I look at it in hindsight, I think it's a sad situation that we had to be through that. And it's not something that is a highlight of the career. It's just something it had to be done.
Yeah. And as a big brother, as you said, that you knew something had to be delivered. A message had to be delivered that you can't get away with this, and you're not going to mess with our livelihood, which it did. But it still had to be difficult because, you know, Jacques was not a fighter. I mean, he was, you know, he was a tremendous wrestler and a performer in the ring, but that wasn't who he was. No. And it must have been very hard for you because like you said, it really did have to be him, because if you would have taken care of it, it wouldn't have helped Jacques. It would have been, oh no, big brother had to come in and save you. But at the same time, you knew the reputation of Tom, and he had his clique. That could have gone really bad. Could have gone very badly. So how hard was it for you to say no, you know, to stay in that and say, no, you know, Jacques really does have to do this? I know you told him, you know, if I have to do it, I'll do it. But I think bottom line, you knew that the only way that this situation comes out where we, you know, have that respect back in the locker room is he had to do it.
He had to do it. Well, you get focused. You get on a mission, you get focused. You can't let your emotions sidetrack you or all of a sudden start worrying, what if? No. There's a mission, you just go out, focus on your mission, and whatever happens, we'll deal with it, you know. And at the same time, it was probably, the decision was made, like it was like 5 or 6 days later, I think, that the receipt came from the mistake. It could be a week later, but it was, you know, 5, 6, 7 days later. Every day in the hotel room, I take the mattress off the bed, set it up on the wall, show them how to throw a punch, show them how to transfer the weight, you know. Because, like you said, Jacques was not a fighter. He's admitted, he said it all his life. I'm not a fighter, I'm a worker. But, you know, you go and give an arm punch, it's not going to have much impact. You got to put your weight into it. You know, there's a technique. That's what my dad had taught me when I was younger. So I was teaching him how to throw his weight in, you know. And and I told him, when you do it, don't hesitate. You know, when it's going to happen, because we didn't know where or how, but it was going to happen, but how? When it's time, just focus, hit your mark, and just do it. Don't hesitate. If you hesitate, you're not giving it full impact. It's gonna backfire on you. So you do it or you don't. And if you do, don't hesitate. Just do it. And so that's the way it went.
Yeah, and I like the way Jacques says that, you know, with the roll of quarters, which is part of the lore of this, that you called your father the night before, and Jacques was saying, well, you know, I don't know if he's going to tell us, you know, are you sure you know what you're doing, whatever. And he goes, no, what you do is get a roll of quarters, wrap it up in tape, because you had to get him down or get him to the point where he's.
Oh, yeah. You know, Sean, my dad, before being a professional wrestler, or even during at one point, my Uncle Johnny owned a big nightclub in Montreal, which was one of the biggest nightclubs, you know, and my dad was the doorman. And
Uh,
it was near the port of Montreal, so a lot of sailors would come in, they'd get drunk, this and that, whatever. There was real problems. That was also part of my dad's reputation because everybody knew Montreal. If you want to go create problems, don't go to the Mocambo. Go anywhere else, not there.
yeah, not
And
there.
so, and my dad told me when I was young, if you're caught in a situation where it's unavoidable, he says, hit first and talk later.
Yeah.
So if there's no chance, he's the first one that hits, he's won 50% of the battle already.
Mm.
So he said, if it's unavoidable, he says, don't look for it. But if you're caught, there's no choice. Hit first, talk later. So and so for my dad, it's all about no matter how you play the game, it's winning that counts. So
Right.
bottom line is, Jacques needed a little help. Take a roll of quarters, put it in your fist. It'll give you a little extra leverage.
Give it over, get it over fast. And people say it's hard to believe that here you have these big men who are in the ring and very physical and taking all these bumps and everything. And how could somebody like that be bullied? Well, it went on all the time, right? I mean, the people, and it was always this, trying to people, you're battling every day for a position there because, as you mentioned, you
Well,
couldn't even be hurt. You had to go in the ring because the next day
yeah,
you could be gone and lose your place.
yeah.
So, but
And
it's
a
people
lot of
find it
people
hard to
get mad
believe.
at you. A lot of people thought, oh, you guys are all a bunch of buddies having fun out there. No, they were cliques, and there was a lot of animosity between guys. And back then, there was also a lot of drugs involved and steroids and stuff, which enhanced the aggressivity probably. And like I've mentioned many times, and I'm sure I never took steroids. I never took drugs. I never drank. I never smoked. Vince McMahon told me once, says, Ray, when I was a commentator, he says, you're like someone from another planet in our business. Yeah, says you're like an extraterrestrial. He says, I wish I had more guys like you. But I said, thank you. I take that as a compliment. But he says, you're like from another planet, because I'm straight. After the match, I went to bed. I would work out, go to the gym. It was a business for me. I'm not out there partying. No, it's a business.
Yeah.
I was buying properties and buying properties. That's what I was doing.
Well, I know that, and Jacques mentioned, I think at one point, because, it really did become this body organization. It was like how you looked and the bigger muscles.
Yeah.
And he said at one point you guys had discussion, like maybe we need to do this. Do you remember ever having that conversation? And then he said, you both decided, well, no, we're not going to do
I never would have brought that up.
it.
My brother could have brought it up, but for me, that was never an option in my life. Not even if Vince would have said, Ray, you'd have to put on a little muscle mass, you get I said, Vince, I'm sorry, I can't do that.
Yeah.
I valued my health over anything else.
Yeah.
And like I said, I was pretty set financially, pretty young. So it wasn't like I need to eat. No, I'm okay. That's why when I quit wrestling at 34, Vince says, you're too young. I haven't even begun what I want to do with you guys. Vince, I don't have the motivation anymore, and we were injured a lot back then, and all that. And on the road, 25 days a month, never being home. I said, I don't have that motivation. I don't need this anymore, So I just
Yeah.
want
The crude definition of that is they say F you money. But
yeah,
it's amazing though that early on that you were able to do that because that let you have choices. As you mentioned, a lot of these guys didn't have that and they would have to. And I remember, and I know you did it many, many, many times, but I remember being backstage there and seeing some of these guys in the locker room where they couldn't get off the bench
yep,
and then go out there and have a hell of a match. I still to this day don't understand like how they physically could do it, but it
no,
is that mentality.
yeah,
And you touched on it, but it was really that it was making a deal with the devil in a sense that you're going to reach the pinnacle of professional wrestling. You're going to make a lot of money. You're going to
yep,
be a rock star because
yeah,
you're going to be known the world over, and yet there is a heavy price to pay. You talk about the road dates you guys did, and this is
yeah,
stuff that was unseen at the time because sure people saw you on television, but they didn't know that you had just done, a 14-day stretch where
yeah.
you show up to TV and it's just another night because you got to be somewhere in the morning. How tough was it was that schedule?
It was incredibly tough. I don't even know. I think it's even inhumane when you think about it. You know, for me, like I said, I understand why a lot of the guys maybe did what they did, like did drugs or did
Yeah.
whatever to be able to cope with
Painkillers.
all that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I keep telling my wife, I said, because I still think of it when I imagine the road the way it was. I pat myself on the back because I did it straight.
Oh,
Like I said, I didn't even take aspirin. When I said I had injured my leg, I was going to the ring and the sweat was coming down. I wouldn't even take Tylenol for the pain. I was always straight. So I lived every moment of every day completely aware of what I was living. And so when I look at it today, it was hell. The life on the road, it was hell. It was, you'd look at it today, would you go back on the road? No, hell no.
yeah. Yeah.
Back then it was okay. You have an opportunity to be in the biggest wrestling organization in the world. Who would not want to be there? Did it for a while. But when I was gone, Vince said, he says, give me a week. When I gave him a notice, and it was a 3-month notice, which was unheard of, you know, I took 5 months to make sure that was what I wanted to do before giving my notice. 5 months before I gave my notice, I knew pretty much I wanted to quit the road. But I still waited in case it was just a phase. The night I gave the notice, Vince says, you're way too young. I said, Vince, I don't need this anymore. He says, give me a week. I'll make you an offer you can't refuse. And he says, he wanted to offer the moon. I said, Vince, if you'd have said that a year ago, I would have been thrilled.
Oh.
Today, I'm just not there anymore. I just want to go home. Please respect that. But he kept trying to convince me. He says, just hear me out. Give me 1 week. Anyways, at the end, I said, Vince, okay, but my mind is made up. I want to finish. This was right the day after SummerSlam, 89. And I gave a notice for Survivor Series 89, which was 3 months later.
Yeah.
And that night, I couldn't sleep all night. Every time I'd fall asleep, I'd be having a nightmare. I'm in the dressing room. Why am I still on the road? I wanted to be home. I didn't want to be on the road anymore. Then I'd wake up all in sweat. I had hit the end of it, I called the secretary the next morning and I said, hi, this is Ray Rougeau. Could you please tell Vince he wants to offer us the moon to stay in this and that. Ask him to respect. I just want to go home. I don't even want to hear his offer. So then she said, okay, I'll relay the message. He didn't get back to me with that, but then he talked to Pat. I have to find a way to keep him in the organization. That's where they came up to ask me if I'd be interested in doing the interviews. He wanted to keep me in the company.
Yeah.
So when he came up with it, he says, Ray, would you be interested in that? I said, Vince, I've never had any training to become an announcer, this and that. I've been interviewed and stuff, but I don't. He says, you do great, this and that. So my question was, mostly people would ask, okay, well, how much does it pay? I didn't care because I didn't need to work anymore. I was like, what's the schedule? That was my question. What's the schedule? And back then, they were taping once every 3 weeks. So we'll have you come in once every 3 weeks for the Superstars and Challenge, do 6 interviews per night. So if each show had 2-minute interviews, and so you can do that once every 3 weeks. So, okay, so I'll go out 17 times a year. I said, okay, that's the schedule I can live with. That's how it started. But then it's like in the mob thing. Just as I thought I was out, they pulled me back in. Just liked what I was doing and then brought me in more and then did more. Then I was going to New York once a week to Stamford every week, then pay-per-views and then became the main voice on the French network for France, and then, Ray, Laura Lafferty's had airplane issues today. Could you do it with Gorilla? Could you do challenge, international challenge in English? No problem. I'd go do that. Ray, we do this and then face to face and then whatever. But I enjoyed it. That was fun.
Yeah.
That I enjoyed.
Well, and you did a lot, and that was like a whole new career for you, which I certainly respect because I think you always appreciated what we did, and
Yeah.
you slid right into it. And the fact that you were bilingual was also a tremendous asset for them. But that is just another big part of it. But getting back to your career in the WWF. And you came in naturally baby faces, but in the end, it was this balance act where you would have some people rooting for you and not rooting for you just because you were Canadians. It had nothing to
Yeah,
do with, anything
yeah.
else.
Especially
Um,
French Canadians.
yes, exactly.
Yeah,
So talk about that entrance into the WWF, because it didn't take long. I mean, you became very popular, but at some point it was okay. You're going to be a lot better as heels.
yeah, yeah.
And
Well,
I know you
basically,
didn't believe it at first.
yeah, well, basically, when we came in, you're right.
Yeah.
We came in and, we got over it to a certain extent, but there was a small percentage that we could not crack. And it was because we were French Canadians and all that. We did for about a year like that, maybe a little over a year and a
Yeah.
half, something like that. And then at one point, we saw the worst place to be in the business is to be caught in the rocking chair in
Yeah.
between. You either want to
Purgatory.
be loved or hated,
Yeah.
And we were like caught in between there. There was always a percentage, and that was frustrating. And my brother and I, one day, we talked about it. We said, maybe we should turn heel. And I was like, you think so? Yeah. And he said, yeah, they're looking for a reason to boo us, so we could give it to them and all that. Anyways, we toyed with the thought. A week later, one of the agents said, Vince wants to fly you guys to Stanford. He wants to have a talk with you. Okay, we're on the road somewhere. So they flew us to Stanford, picked us up, flew us into LaGuardia, drove us up to Stanford. So we get with Vince in his office. So he says, hey guys, how are you? Great, this and that. Start small talk. After that, he says, I want to throw something by you guys. He says, what would you think of turning heel? My brother and I remember, my brother was sitting on my right. We both turned, looked at each other, and this is 1987.
Yeah.
We looked at each other and we laughed. We said, Vince, it's so funny because we talked about this last week. So he had been thinking about it on his side, and my brother and I talked about it the week before, and we said, I think it would be a great move. And Vince says, you guys could become the most hated team that we have here. And he says, I have an idea. I said, maybe you can call us the Vince McMahon instead of Vince McMahon. He made a joke because, he was the boss. Everybody hates the boss,
Yeah. Hey, you were way ahead of your time.
Yeah, yeah, really. So we
Right?
said, maybe we could be called the Vince McMahon,
Yeah.
And Vince laughed. But then he says, I have an idea. He says, I'd like to do it gradually, slowly, and not like we turn on a babyface team or like often happens,
Right.
double cross. He said, I'd like to do it over a couple of 2 or 3 months. He said, I'll have you come in with American flags. And they're going to boo us for that, because basically it was only in the States. Because in Canada, well, actually, there was also Western Canada because there was the English-French issue there.
Yeah.
But in Europe, we're babyface. In France, they loved us. In Belgium, wherever. It was in the United States mostly that we were more heelish. So he says, I said, they're going to boo us for coming in with American flags. He says, yep. He says, the way we're going to do it, he says, you guys follow my lead. You'll see. We'll have you come in and, start doing little interviews, wanting to say it. He says, you're going to be so painted, lay it on so thick about how much we love the United States of America and how much, we really love you guys. Like, they're going to start saying, hey, these guys are full of it, But he says, we'll do it slowly. And he says, he had us made mistakes, like for Memorial Day and Independence Day. We said, happy Independence Day to everyone. Then the announcer would say, no, it's Memorial Day. Oh, yeah, same thing. Some people would be a little pissed off about that, because we messed it up. That was the blueprint. Then after we started doing it, we kept working babyface, but they started booking us with babyface teams. So we'd work babyface, and once in a while, the babyface team would get a little of the upper hand. We'd kind of get, okay. People say, oh, they're getting frustrated, But we did it over a couple of months. And the interviews, we started milking it a little more, tweaking it. And then at one point, he says, we announced we're going to do a contest about moving to the United States. We love the United States so much. We are going to move here. And we started we said there was a phone line set up. The people, the people that called in the most and says, please, Rougeau Brothers, come move to our state, the people that wanted us the most will go there. Eventually, it was said we were going to Memphis, Tennessee.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, because Memphis had like a little heat sometimes with things,
Yeah.
you know. So it was Memphis, Tennessee. So we go there with our goofy flags and stuff, and then we recorded the song. Uh, oh, and Vince gave us the Jimmy Hart as manager, you know, and Jimmy Hart double crossed the Harts because, and when he came out in an interview, he says, you know, I'm going to be managing the Fabulous Rougeau Brothers, you know. And he says, the great part is I still own the Hart Foundation's contract. So I get half of it and I'm going to give it to you guys, you know, like the income from the Harts coming up. And we're
Right.
all thrilled about it and being goofy and this and that. And it just went from that. Then it was the song we had, our entrance theme.
Oh my God, I love that song so much.
Yeah. And we sat, Jimmy Hart, and I think it was Jimmy Gentry, I think that we played the music and Jimmy Hart and they did all the musical arrangements. And my brother Jimmy and I, we'd sit down, we're on the road and going through lyrics, you know, how could we work this? And we wanted to put a little French in because we said that'll create extra heat. Why are they singing in French, you know?
Yeah.
And on the English side, you remember the theme, you know,
Yeah. Barry Manilow. Who came up with
yeah,
that one?
yeah,
That was
and
great.
you know, tell all the girl, you know, the Rougeaus on their way, you know, all our things, environmental. But when we do the French side, we'd be knocking the States, knocking the Americans.
Jabbing. Yeah.
I'm thinking, so that, you know, thinking we're so smart, they don't understand what we're saying in French, but we knew that they'd get through it, you know. It was just wonderful. I mean, that, and Jimmy Hart's such a great guy.
Yeah, I was going to
Yeah,
mention that to have him as a manager, and I've heard it time and time again. We had some great managers during those periods of time, of course. But the thing about Jimmy was it was never about him. That he was always thinking about, how do I make these guys better? And then also going way above and beyond. I mean, he would have, 3 or 4 jackets that he would have
yeah,
made for whoever he was
yeah.
doing. Uh, what was it really about him that really made working with him great and also made you guys better?
His, the respect Jimmy has for the business.
Yeah.
That's one thing. I think that's the number one thing. When you respect something or someone, that sets the foundation to build on. So Jimmy he respected us, he respected the business, he respected the boys. He was dedicated. I never met anyone more dedicated than Jimmy Hart to the business, to the people he was with and worked with. He was loyal. It was never too late to discuss something. It was never too early to discuss something, and it was never the wrong time to discuss something. He was always there, and if you say, Jimmy, I have an idea something, great, great. He was always
Right.
and he said, it's not like you're bothering him. To him, it's great. You know, one of the best, the nicest human beings I've ever met.
Yeah.
One of the nicest people. I called him for his birthday, his last birthday. You know, it's how many years ago? I mean, we're talking 38 years ago, 37 years ago since we worked together. And when I speak to him now, I still feel for this guy. I love Jimmy Hart. He
Yeah, it
is
was like it was
such
yesterday. And
he's
it's really true. It's
he's the
like
best.
yesterday with him. And
Yeah.
I worked with him at WrestleMania, not this past one, but the one before, and hadn't seen him in a long time. And it was just like you pick up wherever you are. But it is amazing to me, not only like you said, how much he loves the business, and
Yeah.
he's still the same guy,
Yep.
and also incredibly loyal to the people that and he knows how to play the game. He's done it for his entire career, but
Yep.
at the same time, you're there. There's people that he was very loyal to. He was very
Yep.
loyal to Terry, Hulk
Yep.
Hogan, and regardless of what anybody thought about the Hulkster but that's the way he is with people. And you couldn't crack him. He would go on do appearances or whatever like that, and he's not throwing you. He's not throwing somebody under the bus. He's not throwing garbage out there. And it's just who he is. And you can't help but love the guy because he was and so committed to the business. Like I mean, he loves it, like you said, and has lived it his whole life. And it's like he hasn't lost a step.
Jimmy's a one of a
Yeah,
kind.
yeah,
There will never be another Jimmy Hart. You know, he's a one of a kind, like I said, human being. And like he's a genuine person.
Yeah.
You know, you talked about loyalty, you talked about respect. He really loved a lot of the people he worked with. Like with me, I mean, I call him Jimmy, happy birthday. You know, I really, and
Hey, baby, good to see
I
you.
love you so much. He said, I love working with you guys, and you were the best team I ever had. You guys were always on time, always never a headache, this and that. I said, Jimmy, we were a magnificent team, the three of us together. I would not, if they could have offered any manager in the world, knowing what I know now, Jimmy Hart's a no-brainer. He's the man. He's the
Yeah.
man.
And you have, to have something like that is great because, like you said, you were together a long time back then when you were with these guys and you had to work with them every night.
Yeah,
You get somebody that you don't click with, man. It's torture.
yeah,
And you talk about when you guys did make that change to becoming heels, and it is amazing that it was kind of a slow build, but you felt that build immediately.
oh,
And it was that whole thing of I could imagine Vince telling you guys, no, you're gonna say how much you love the US and all this, and you're going, well, how is that gonna work? But it
yeah. You
was, oh
sure?
God, it was so after a while, you guys got so, you got right into it. You completely understood it. And like you said, it was those little dig things, and people would be going like, did they just say that? Like what jerks? And
Yeah,
it does it. I just remember that heat because it was so sappy and so disingenuine, and you're, oh no, and then the tiny little flags, and you guys would wave them in the camera.
yeah.
It
And the
was
thing is
brilliant.
also, Sean, is we could deliver in the ring too.
Yeah.
So
No,
that was the thing. So it's one thing to have, I think
a
we
good
we had
gimmick.
pretty
Yeah.
much the whole package because we could work in the ring, we could do the promos, we had the personalities, the gimmick, the personas, we had it all, and so that's what made it, I think, believable. Because if you get in the ring and then it's like, the only good part was your entrance, it's a letdown. But
Yeah.
we had matches, I'm pretty sure you must remember them back then. And I hope you do.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. That hasn't gone yet. It's still
yeah.
some mice
No,
running
no, no,
around
no.
up
But I'm
there.
saying, no, you say, I don't remember those matches.
Yeah.
But, Pat Patterson came up with the idea to, about us with the Rockers
Uh,
doing the marathon matches, which were called back then. That was before the Ironman matches and triathlon, whatever, marathon match. We went 1 hour Broadway and then, well, 1 hour with the falls being equal. At the end, tiebreak, we did the sudden death overtime. We'd do another 15, 17 minutes. We'd be an hour and a quarter in the ring in a match.
yeah.
And the people were standing going nuts. We did, I don't know, 8 or 10 of them in different cities. Pat knew we could work. I did a lot of matches with Pat. I did 1 hour Broadways with Pat Patterson when he was
Well,
single matches. One
yeah.
hour Broadway with Pat.
Yeah. People don't remember. A lot of people don't know what a great performer he was in the ring
Yeah,
because they never
yeah,
got to see it really. He was kind
yeah.
of an announcer when it all started.
And I remember when the idea was brought up with the Rockers with Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty. I remember we're going to go 1 hour and we're going to go a sudden death overtime. I remember Shawn said, "What the hell are we going to do out there for an hour?" I said, "Shawn, don't worry about it."
Yeah.
I said, we'll build it. We'll
Stick with
build it.
us.
You
Yeah.
know, we're going to draw a storyline, create a movie, and we'll go through it. And the way that you finish on top. And we did it. And I'm sure he gained a lot of experience in that because he's like, what are we going to do for an hour? We went for an hour and a quarter. And
Yeah.
the people were going nuts. But when
It,
we did that, I had already been in the business. It was 1988, we did those matches. I'd been in the business 16 years already. So I had experience and I
yeah.
had probably done 20-hour Broadway matches. I did Broadway matches with Nick Bockwinkel, Bob Backlund, Ric Flair, single matches, Broadways. I worked with a lot of great talent in my career before getting to WWE. So I came there with baggage, and experience. So when I got there, when I joined the WWE, I'd been in the business, it was 86, 71, 15 years in the business when I first stepped into WWE. So I wasn't green. I'd wrestled in Japan, I'd wrestled in Europe, I'd wrestled in the States. I was in Atlanta for 3 years in 75, 76, 77, 78. for the NWA on the WTBS, worked with Ole and Gene Anderson back then.
Yeah.
You know, those were good workers. You know, I worked with Macho Man when he was starting in his career, Ricky Steamboat. You know,
I
I
know
had
he's a
great
good friend of
matches.
yours.
Huh?
Ricky Steamboat was a very good friend of yours.
Oh
And
yeah, him and
yeah,
I were really good friends. Him and I in Atlanta, he was my best friend in Atlanta. We used to
yeah.
work out together, travel together. He's a great guy also, you know, good human being. I worked with Paul Orndorff back then, you know, a lot of great talent, you
Oh,
know.
we did. We really did back then. And you know, you mentioned these hour-long matches. Can you imagine them trying to pull that off today? Because I think that
Right.
that's part of what's been lost is that art of storytelling.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
like you said, today people view something like I'm gonna watch an hour wrestling match. Like
yeah,
not only with the attention span that we have today with our phones and everything,
yeah,
but to actually experience something like that. And as you said, the slow build, boom, back,
yeah,
bring it back down, find
yeah,
the listening to the what the crowd is
yeah.
doing, having that ability to improvise and say, okay, this is where they're going.
Well, Sean,
Is it
back
a lost
then,
art?
yeah, yes, because in nowadays, I mean, you know, I still watch the business
Yeah.
because I always like the business. Yeah, I still watch it, but I look at a lot of the matches and it looks like choreographed. You see somebody runs the rope, the other one's already been down waiting for him to come and leap, you know.
Yeah.
And so it's like every step is calculated now. But it's different. You know, I'm not
Right.
criticizing, it's
Right.
just different.
It
But
is.
back when I started, my first hour of match, I was 17 years old. I was single match, 1 hour Broadway. And I was like, I'd only been working 1 year, going for 1 hour now with Don Serrano. I don't know if you ever heard of him.
Uh,
He lived in Texas. He was a good worker. He taught me a lot. And
mhm.
basically, we went in, we just knew the finish. We had one or two spots planned out.
Isn't
So
that
basically, if you
amazing?
look at
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
we had about 3 minutes of the match planned out. We're going 1 hour.
Yeah.
So 57 minutes of it, we're playing it by ear and we're going with what's catching with the crowd, what's not, what they're wanting, what they don't want. We're readjusting as we go along, and we're playing it ad lib as we go along.
Yeah.
And when we did the hour matches with the Rockers, that's what we did. Sometimes it would finish 2 falls each, you know, to go to sudden death overtime.
Yeah.
We'd plant the finishes for the 4 falls. That was it. And basically, probably the first fall will go around 20, 25 minutes. Then, you know, but it could happen in 15, it could happen in 30. But around that area, we'll have that first fall. And, you know, we had just the finishes fixed out. The rest, we played it as it went along.
That's
That's the lost art.
yeah, absolutely. And I think a good way to describe it is having a good dance partner. You can go out there and dance with people, but every once in a while you get somebody who just kind of anticipates what your next move is,
Yeah,
and it just clicks. And you guys could work with anybody, but there
yeah,
were a few tag teams that just you guys just were tremendous together, and the Rockers were that team, one of them.
yeah, yeah.
What was it that made it so special with them? We know what kind of performer Shawn Michaels was, and even you know Marty Jannetty doesn't get a lot of credit, but I remember back then that he was as good or even better than Shawn in many situations. There, it turned out obviously different for them. But what
Yeah.
was it about that tag team that worked so well with you guys?
You know, in life, everything is timing.
Yeah,
The timing, we had turned heel. We were like probably the most hated team in the WWE at that point. We were Now we just turned heel. We're full-fledged heels. The young girls were loving them, you know, good-looking young guys running in
yeah,
the Rockers, fun guys. It's the timing. What they brought in, what we brought when we did that angle. I don't know if you remember it when we hit the Rockers with the
yeah.
megaphone. Because yeah,
Oh my God, yeah.
that lit the angle on fire, you know, and
I don't know how you guys got out of the building. I mean, that was, you know, you rarely, I know there was, you can talk about heat because in other territories and stuff like that where it was crazy. I mean, Hacksaw talks about, you know, with
Yeah.
down in mid South, and they used to know like how great a night it's going to be by how many fights were out in the crowd before they got
Yeah.
started.
Yeah. Yeah.
But to see that in the WWF was really rare. To see where it was
Well,
to the point where, I think you've talked about it before, where you just feel like this could be dangerous,
yeah.
where,
Yeah.
and it
It
was
got, it got to that level.
right.
It got to
Yeah.
that level. At one point, we had death threats, and I got death threats, and we were going out. Death threats. We're going on a tour. We're going to be in San Francisco, and I got death threats for San Francisco show.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, I could say, okay, hey, great. We got that much heat. We're getting death threats.
Yeah.
But what if something happened? There have been wrestlers that have been stabbed before from
Right.
fans and stuff. I said, what if something happens? And then I look at it with hindsight and I said, what an idiot I was. I got death threats. That's going to happen in San Francisco. We go there, no big deal. No, I made sure it was a big deal. So I called the office. I said, I got death threats for the show in San Francisco. We're going to be working with the Rockers. And I said, I'd like a little extra security, And when we got to the airport, we were careful, because I don't know, it'd be something happen at the airport. When we get to a
Yeah.
hotel, we didn't tell where we were staying. When we got to the building, we'd asked for extra security when we got to the building. When we went up for the match, we had extra security around them. I said, I don't want anybody being able to lean over the railing and stab me or something. So we had extra police around us to make sure nobody could touch us. I just took the extra precaution. When we left intact. Everything was
Yeah.
fine.
Thank
So for
God.
me, it was check. I did the
Yeah.
right thing. But it did get to that level.
Yeah.
There was one time I was in a town. Oh man, where was it? In Louisiana somewhere. Towards the end, I was coming towards the ring, and all of a sudden, as I get there, the security was so-so, but we had a lot of heat. This was before the match. I come in, all of a sudden, as I get towards, we're going with the flags, turning, all of a sudden somebody yells something, and I got hit in the face, whack. My reflex was to turn,
Yeah.
and it was a woman, she probably 7 months pregnant, that
Oof.
just hit me. And I lost it. Not with her. It's
Yeah.
like, man, what? Because sometimes it's a reflex. You get hit, you turn, somebody's right there. You saw that just hit you. What I saw was the stomach sticking out. I went, I went in, I had the match. I remember I came back. That's the only time that ever happened because I've always been a cool guy,
Yeah.
I came back in the dressing room. I had a fit. I called the agent and I said, I got hit up there because the security wasn't up to par. And I said, I almost hit that woman and I would have been sued for everything
Oh
I
my
own.
God. Yeah.
I said, why? My whole career I worked to do something. And this, because I lost it. I
Yeah.
lost it, you know.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And it was after that, it was like, man, I don't need this anymore.
Well, maybe that was the beginnings of it, but in the meantime, you still had some other great runs. What other teams do you think that really stand out to you that you guys worked really well with?
The Hart Foundation.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Yeah, because we worked with them when we were baby faces, they were heels.
Hmm.
And then later on, when we turned heel, they had become baby faces. We had another run with them, and we had Jimmy Hart with us back then, So we had good runs with the Hart Foundation. And I enjoyed working with the Hart Foundation. They were, Brett, we know is an excellent wrestler. I always liked Brett. Um, we we were brought up basically with the same psychology of
Right,
what business
Stu,
is.
yeah.
Yeah, he was brought up with Stu. I was brought up with my dad. And my dad, just to give you a little comparison, Stu used to stretch Brett in the gym when he was a kid. Learned the hard way. My dad, before he smartened me up to the business, I was probably 14 years old. We're in that gym I told you where he brought me in 3 days a week. He says, okay, I'm going to do a little bit with you. I didn't know where it was work. He says, don't worry, it's going to push a bit, Okay, so we lock up, but we lock up and we're stiff. Says, be tight. Okay, telling me to be stiff. Okay, so we're pushing. Now we're really pushing. And he says, okay, let's say you push me in the rope. I said, okay. He says, the referee says break. What do you do? Okay, so I said, I put my hands up and I said, okay, I break. So you push the rest of the rope. Referee says break. I stand up. He slapped me in the face. Whack. Man, I got all teary-eyed. A good one. He says, always protect yourself. Okay.
Lesson learned. Yeah.
Yeah. So even when I knew it was a work, and then I worked, when I'd clinch, push somebody in the rope, referee would break, I'd back up, and I'd be protecting myself.
Yeah.
It adds credibility. Otherwise, you say break, you got a guy that hates you and you hate him in front of you. Referee's break, you just let go, and I'd knock you on your butt. You know? So when I break, I'm always
Still
ready
ready.
to protect myself. Brett had that mentality. Brett and I clicked well in the ring. And I had some single matches with Brett, a lot of mostly tag team matches. But we'd be in, you know, and we played on the facts of the boxing a little bit. You know, sometimes he'd have the fist up and I'd throw a couple of jabs, say, hey, ref, this is wrestling, it's not boxing. He's boxing with me, you know, we do little things like that. But I think it was the credibility and the upbringing that we connected, and we're on the same page as far as that went. So I really enjoyed working with the Hart Foundation. And the combination of Brett and the Anvil, they had a good combination. They were completely different in styles, different personalities, but they complemented each other well, which I think was the same with my brother and I. We had different styles, different personalities, but we complemented each other. So my brother was more spectacular, more outgoing, more flamboyant than I was. But I had the side that, yeah, but Ray brings another
The science of wrestling.
Yeah.
Yeah. And back then, you know, it's amazing how the tag team division just blew up. I mean, I think at one point, it seemed like we had as many tag teams as we had singles because it was so popular. And people before that had been used to seeing when you had tag teams, you know, you had the big monsters and then the big monsters would face each other. And there wasn't a lot of type rocker type, you know, there was a few. And it was always this big mismatch. And it was a way like, look, how do you sell these monsters going up against people that like you guys could move in the ring?
Well, well, you have to use psychology.
Yeah.
Because you can't come in and match size and strength against the monster. So at one point, you're going to have to make the monster look like a monster. But at one point, you have to find his Achilles tendon and capitalize on it.
Yeah.
And, you know, and that's where the monster all of a sudden, oh, you found a weakness in the monster and you can start capitalize on. And I have a perfect example of that. In Quebec City, I had a singles match, me against Big John Studd. You remember John Studd?
Oh yeah, yeah.
God, he's a monster of a man. He's like what, 6'7" or whatever, 6'6", 6'7", 300 and whatever pounds. I was 5'11", 220, 225. I'm working a singles match with him. Now we have to have a match that's going to be credible, it's going to be good, and that the people are going to believe that.
Believe it, yeah.
You know, at one point I can't say, oh, I'm stronger than him, or I'm, you know, this and that. No. But at one point, I'm gonna have to use my brains.
You got to outsmart him. Yeah.
Like what I did when I ended Zarinov Lebev's career. I'm against this 6'4", 260-pound guy that wants to kill me. No, I'm gonna kill you. But now how am I gonna do this? You know, I have to be smart about it. So the same with John Studd. I worked a match with him to where for the fans sitting there, it's a credible match. It's believable. Not that, man, look at this. If you wanted to, he could break Rougeau in two. No, they didn't think that because I didn't let them think that. And we built the match to where, yes, I'm the underdog right now because I've got this monster in front of me, but I've got the guts, I've got the willpower, and I've got the mental fortitude. I'm going to fight this guy until I can't fight anymore, and I'm going to find a way to try to beat him. And the fans are on the edge of their seats. That's the psychology.
Right. And he's gonna hurt you, but you're not gonna give up and you're gonna find a way. Do you guys feel, and there was a lot of things that changed in professional wrestling that they have to give credit to the WWE. And do you guys feel that you were a part of that like I said, that changed the whole concept of how, you know, tag teams performed in the ring, because they did have these many, you know, mismatch type. You had these high flyers coming in. You guys were I always kind of saw you as kind of a both. I mean, you weren't small, but you could really move in the ring. Do you guys feel that you were a part of that, making that change?
A lot of people were part of that, but I said definitely we have our share of the change that happened in there, because like you said, before that, it was like monsters on each side facing each other, you know, and then all of a sudden you could have it to where it's not the guys that are as big, let's say like us, that were, yeah, to the normal people, we were big, but as far as what the wrestling business was, we were not that big. And we could go in and work with the Rockers, which were not big either, and we'll tear the house down. It's like, wow, wait a minute. And you know, another thing, when you go back then, a lot of the times, most of the times, my brother and I with the Rockers, they put us on last because a lot of people had a hard time following us. Now, if you got smaller guys that are being put on last because it's hard to follow, that says something. That means the fans are into it. Otherwise, if they put us on last and then people started leaving and say, well, we're just, you know, the crowd's going out gradually. No, they were there until the end of our show and we tear the house down. So that sets something for that. And after that, it showed that you could have guys that were not 300 pounds and 6'6" that could draw, you know? Yep. And that's where today, the guys are not big today. I mean, actually, they're fairly small, you know? On TV, they look, you know, pretty big, but when you, like, well, I did, before the pandemic, I did 3 years of the pay-per-views, you know, on the WWE network. I was doing the French broadcast, you know, and I'd see the guys, and they looked a lot smaller in person than on you know, but they're in tremendous shape. I mean, they're great athletes. I have all the respect in the world for them. But it went from back in the 70s where it was all monsters to now where they're fine-tuned athletes now. Yeah. There was a transition of going from monsters to fine-tuned athletes. We were in the transition area.
Yeah, and it is amazing though that you know, when you came in, you knew that the WWF was big, but did you have any idea? And you saw it happening because then we started having these pay-per-view events, and it was becoming more popular. I mean, around the world, of what it would become, even what you went through.
Yeah, no, I couldn't imagine it. I never dreamt of it. Never even fantasized about the business being what it was. When I came in, I knew it was big. Yeah. But it still grew after we came in. You know, we came in right after WrestleMania 2. You know, being on the event of WrestleMania 3 was kind of mind blowing. Yeah. You get there. Never thought I would see that many people in one stadium for a wrestling event. That for me was a turning point in the business. I think we went to another level after WrestleMania 3. But everywhere you went after that, you were looked at as. I'll give you just a little example of how the business went out, had a much wider viewership than before. Wrestling had its viewers, but then it became a lot more a lot more accepted, a lot
mainstream.
More. Pardon?
Mainstream. It was mainstream. Crossover, yeah.
I'm in Paris one night. We have a show. My brother and I are the main event in Paris. It's sold out. We're against Dino Bravo and Greg Valentine, you know, the Dream Team. There was you know, and you've heard of Studio 54 in New York. There was an equivalent in Paris, which was called Chez Régine. It's at Régine. She was a person, Régine. So Chez Régine was the equivalent of Studio 54. Régine was sitting, because wrestling was mainstream. She had all the stars going there, this and that. She was in first row ringside at our match that night in Paris. And she sent us an invitation to my brother and I to go over to her club after the show. I never went out in the clubs and stuff, but it was like such an invitation, like it's a once in a lifetime thing. We're invited to go to Régine, you know? But I was on a 7 o'clock flight to Milan the next morning for Italy. I was like, oh man, but I couldn't pass it up. So my brother and I said, we'll go. We get there. When you get there, it's an exclusive closed door thing. 2 bodyguards at the door. You don't just come in, open and walk out. No, you don't walk in. You have to have an invitation to go there. Yeah. So we get to the door. So we speak French, you know. They say, oui, bonjour, je peux vous aider? You know, yes, can we help? We were invited by Régine to come over with the Fabulous Rougeau Brothers. Oh, we weren't the Fabulous. We were the Rougeau Brothers then. Yeah. So they said, okay, one moment, please. Like the Wizard of Oz, the door opens, they go in, door closes, we're standing outside. Like a minute or two later, the door opens, And it's Regine that welcomes us at the, he says, welcome. Regine says, oh, I'm so glad you came. So we come in. She says, you guys hungry something? You know, because we ate early back
Yeah,
then
yeah.
before wrestling. We said, yeah. So she called her chef, had him come in at midnight to come and cook something for us to eat. He was in bed sleeping. She brought him in to come and cook for us. And we come in. So then she says, oh, do you mind if I introduce you to a few of my friends? I said, yeah, no problem. So we come up. So she introduced us. Somebody says, I'll give you the name right after. She says, oh, let me introduce you to, he says, I know these guys. They're the Rougeau brothers. My kids love them. I'm like, it was Michael Douglas, the actor.
Oh, wow.
So he was there promoting the movie Fatal Attraction. So he was at Regine's that night. We're there. So she says, Michael, let me introduce you to, she told us, I'll introduce you to my friend Michael Douglas. So, okay. So he's not going to know us, Yeah,
You
we
know
come
you.
up. I know these guys. They're the Rougeau brothers. My kids love them. Hey, nice to meet you. We spent 15 minutes chatting with him. He knew who we were. So we said, wow, wrestling is really going
Around
up.
the world.
Then she introduced me to, you remember the singer Sade?
Oh,
Smooth
yeah.
operator, the
Yeah.
singer. We get there, oh, hello. I spent half an hour with her. Grace Jones. And it's
Grace
like,
Jones.
now we're in that circle, you know? That's where I realized, wow, the business is
Yeah, it's taken off a little bit.
taking
And
off.
really, and the man responsible and the of this day, people love or hate him, whatever but you can't take away what Vince McMahon did. And I know that you always had a good relationship with him.
Yep. And I have tremendous respect for Vince McMahon. I mean, he for me, Vince, I considered him a friend back then. But when I became commentator, I got to know him a lot more. I considered him a friend.
Hmm.
And I always said there's one thing, I went through a difficult time, had a divorce 1996. And Vince heard about it. And he says, hey, Ray, I heard you going through a difficult time. Oh, it's okay. Nothing. A lot of people haven't gone through it. He said, I'd like to have a word with you. I want to make sure you're okay. You're feeling okay. We were at a pay-per-view and they were calling him constantly, Vince, we need you for something. He says, I'm with Ray right now. He's my priority. And it's like, I said, Vince, then you? He says, no. He says, you and I, we're in a small room in the building and we're talking. And he wanted to make sure I was okay. And at one point, they came in a few times, Vince, please, we're live in 1 hour. We have a problem. We need to talk. He says, when I'm done with Ray. I was like, Vince, you got a pay-per-view live here in an hour. Do it. He gave me his personal phone number. And back then there weren't cell phones in that.
Yeah.
He gave me a phone. Says, "This is the phone next to my bed. You want to call me 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning. You call me, and I'm there. We'll
Yeah.
talk." He gave me his personal phone. I never forgot that. If you're going through a difficult time, and somebody, at that level, and I was an employee for Vince. Yeah, he liked me. I was a good employee, but he didn't owe me anything. And he gave me his personal number. He says, you need to talk. You call me 2, 3 in the morning. That's the phone next to my bed. You call me. I said, thank you, Vince. I said, I won't call you. But he says, you keep the number in case. I never called him. But the gesture, the hand he lent out at that point in my life, I never forgot that. And I
Yeah, and you,
respected that. And I always had a good relationship with him.
yeah.
So for whatever later in life happened, I wasn't there when that happened. If it did, I'm sorry it did happen. I can't condone it, but at the same time, that's not the Vince McMahon I knew.
Yeah, that's not your experience. And I know you said he was always fair to you guys.
He was always,
Yeah.
yeah, always.
Yeah.
And if I had to talk to him, I said, Vince, could I speak to you? Come on in. And we had a talk, and it was on the same level and a respectful discussion. I always felt respected, and I always respected Vince. And thank you very much. I appreciate it. So there was a respect there. For me, the foundation of every relationship is respect. He respected me, I respected him, and that's the way it went.
Yeah. And another man who's certainly responsible, and whatever people say, how he ends up in the history of professional wrestling. But for me, we aren't even having this conversation if Hulk Hogan doesn't exist in this
Absolutely.
world. And We lost him recently.
Yeah.
And I think you have mixed feelings about him, but at the same time, whenever I have these conversations with people, look, outside of the business or whatever, you cannot deny that without him, none of this happens. Vince McMahon, of course, they had to have that collaboration,
Yeah.
but without him, it doesn't.
Sean, you say I have mixed feelings for it. It's not that I have mixed feelings. At one point in the business, I could see the politics that were going on.
Yeah,
I never liked the political side of business. For me, it's if you earn your spot, if you can perform, you can draw, you can earn your spot, you should be there. It's not because you're the friend of somebody that you should be number two because the friend is number one. I didn't like the politics in the business. That aside, I've always had, like you said, that we wouldn't be here talking today. I wouldn't be in the position I'm in today. I would not be where I am financially today. My life would not be what it is today. I would not be, probably wouldn't be mayor today. There are so many things that would have been different if it had not been for Hulk Hogan and Vince McMahon. I think the two together both needed each other. They both existed, but it's when they came together that created the cataclysm and brought the business. Vince would not be who he is or where he was today without Hulk, and Hulk would not have been where he was without Vince. I have so much gratitude for what happened. In life, you could be grateful for things. I am so grateful that those two met and what they did for the business, where the business is today. It's like, I only have gratitude. And, I watched the documentary on Hulk last
me
week.
too.
Who hasn't made a mistake in life?
Yeah.
And there was only one person and they crucified him.
Yeah. And may he throw the first stone, as they say.
And exactly.
Yeah.
So, that's what I was looking at. Sure. And Hulk says it himself. Yeah, I've made mistakes personally, professionally, but who hasn't? And, so basically when you get to that and everything is also at a certain point in your life, you're at a certain evolution of who you are. And you get to later in life, you have a lot more experience in life and you're maybe less quick to judge somebody on a mistake or an action that they did. You understand life a little more. So you're less judgmental than you were younger. Younger, how many people judge them? You do something, oh, he's no good, or he's that.
Yeah.
You don't have the whole picture, and you don't know where he's been through. You haven't walked in his shoes, And at that point in life, the person could have made a mistake. But maybe 10, 15 years later, they made him say, remember 20 years ago, something I said, I apologize for that. That was out of place. I'm sorry for, hey, no problem. People are not perfect. We are human beings. We have flaws. We have our weaknesses. We have our qualities. We have our faults, whatever. We are complex human beings.
Yeah.
Through that, you go through evolution. Through the evolution, you might have hit hurdles on the way, may have said things or done things that you regret later in life. Say, if it were today, I would not have done that the same way. So maybe at one point, when, like different people, I had mixed feelings because you could see the political side of things. When I look at it today, hey, it was it what it was? And when I look at all the positive that has come out of life, out of the business, out of everything, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
That's what I guess the advantage of getting older. You can be a little more philosophical about something than when you're younger. Younger is boom. Later you can try to understand a little more where that person came from. He was accused of being a racist. I never saw that. And if he used the N-word, many people are not racist, have used that word out of anger or whatever, not because they meant it. People have said things about people out of an emotion or out of a circumstance or out of a reaction, which the day later said they wouldn't have said that. I don't know. There's a lot more understanding today. And you know, I even felt bad when I watched. I'm telling you, honestly, I felt bad. I even
Yeah.
felt a little tight in the throat at one point when I was looking at, the life and the whole thing. I felt sad at one point.
Yeah. No, I was going to say that it was sad in watching it because of everything that he accomplished was incredible. They're
Yeah.
once in a lifetime.
And he
But
did
the
well.
price that he paid was
Yeah.
substantial. With the leg drops and the, you know, and
He
basically
paid the
crippled.
ultimate, he paid the ultimate price.
Yeah.
He,
And his
he
personal
gave
life
his whole
too,
body
everything,
away.
right. And lost everything and was,
Yeah.
but still kept going. And we've seen this story with other guys that maybe didn't reach that pinnacle like that, but at the same thing, the price you pay,
Yeah.
uh, it's a tough business. And it's what's awesome for you is that you made sure you had other choices earlier in life, which is pretty incredible. And that's why I did want to touch on before we wrap up here, though, that you found a different path uh, in the businesses the business that you were involved in, but also you got into politics and have been a mayor of Roudoun, Quebec, now
Yeah.
second term.
Yeah.
Um, uh, you know, how did that happen? Was it just circumstances?
Yeah.
That you feeling responsible for this place that you love so much? You've joined some other pretty lofty names now. Jesse Ventura and you
Yeah.
know uh,
The way it
Kane
happened.
from
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We have the Battle of the Mayors.
yeah.
Uh,
I mean, you got Glenn Jacobs now. So really,
yeah.
why do it? You didn't have
Actually,
to.
it's timing again. In February 2002,
Yeah.
we had stopped broadcasting in French because the contract had been finished in Europe and stuff. And I was doing nothing. So it's okay. So I'm going home. Then, you know, I didn't need to work. So I said, but I didn't, I wasn't going to sit and say, well, I was 47 then. I was going to sit in a rocking chair and rock myself away the rest of my life. Yeah, I go flying with my plane, I go fishing, I go hunting, but that's not every day. I said, oh, I'll take some time off and then I'll do something. I wanted to be implicated, do something. I got elected first time in 2002. I didn't know what I was getting into. And I figured I'll just go, I'll see if I like it. Okay. If I don't, I'll do my term and then I'll say, okay, been there, done that. Thank
So were you
you.
a councilman? What were you? What are they?
City councilor. Yeah.
Counselor. Okay.
So I started in as counselor. So after the first year, people asked, so do you like it? You think you're going to continue another mandate? I said, look, we'll see. We'll do my mandate and we'll see. I wasn't sure at that point because it's all new. It's, and this and
Yeah.
that. Eventually, as it went, the passion grew and the passion grew. So I ran for election 2021. I built my own team. My whole team and I got elected.
Hmm.
2025, last November,
Yeah.
uh, had an election
I
again.
think you got like 60% of the vote, didn't you? Something
Yeah,
like
with
yeah.
three candidates. There was me and two other
Yeah.
candidates. So which was good. So I'm very
Yeah.
happy for me. And it's not like, oh, I was good. No, it's the people appreciate what I've done. Because it's like your report card. You've
Yeah.
been there 4 years. What have you done for 4 years? Now you're up for election. If they don't like what you've done or what you represent or whatever,
Yeah.
you're gone. You're
Yeah.
on an ejectable seat. I've won. This was my seventh consecutive election. So, I've never lost an election. I got elected 7 times in a row. And this is right now, it's been 24 and a half years I've been there.
And I hope you get a chance to speak to young people because
I do.
that's a great way to live your life. I mean, and if just following those things, and I have a son, I have three children, but I have a son, and I have always tried to instill in him that, look,
Yep.
you're responsible for everything you do, but
Yep.
you've got to be disciplined about it. You've got to make up a decision, and you just have to stay that course. And obviously, yeah.
Always. Always.
Yeah, Ray, it's been tremendous talking to you, and I'm really looking forward to an
Yeah.
event that's coming up that uh, I'm gonna travel to Quebec. I haven't been there in many, many years, and to participate in LegendsMania taking place
Yes.
on Saturday, May 30th. I know Jacques has been very busy putting this event together, and he's getting support from the mayor of Roudoun as well. But are you excited about this event? And it sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun.
I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled. The organization, GPW Wrestling, it's first class organization. I went to their event last year. I was like, wow,
Yeah.
the sound system, the lighting, the event, the building, everything is. You won't be embarrassed to be there. You won't walk in and say, "What am I doing here?" You're going to walk in, wow, this is nice, and it's going to be a great event. There are going to be a lot of um, former superstars that are going to be there
Yep.
for autograph signings and events and stuff, including yourself. I'm talking
Yeah.
about a superstar yourself. Uh, it's it's a thing
Hacksaw is going
for
to be there. Jake Roberts,
yeah,
uh,
yeah.
the
Kelly Kelly,
headbangers, the yeah.
uh,
Tito Santana, and then also I know, and I
Rick
really want to mention,
Martel,
Rick
Rick
Martel.
Martel.
Yeah, and he hasn't done anything.
No,
And I'm really anxious to talk to him. He's another one that was like you, who
yeah,
always traveled his own path, believed
yeah,
in himself to
yeah.
no end, and then decided this isn't what I want to do anymore. I know it wasn't anything against the business,
No,
but it's
no.
really awesome though to see him kind of step back in because, and I don't know if you experienced the same thing I did, but I was when I left, I was out of it for a long time where I wasn't really involved in anything professional wrestling, and people were thinking, "Oh God, he was ashamed of that period of time." I'm like, what are you kidding me? It was one of the
Yeah,
greatest experiences of my life, and if Vince McMahon wouldn't have taken that chance on me, I don't have a broadcasting career. I don't have wasn't able
yeah,
would not have been able to do what I did. But I didn't understand why people, like, why did people, I would get these invitations to go to these events. And I'm like, why would they want to hear from me? And then I finally got it. I went to one of these places and somebody came up to me and they were with their son. And they said to me, "Oh God, it's so great to meet you, Sean Mooney." He goes, I remember watching when I was a kid, and
yeah,
and it was the only thing that my dad and I really bonded over, and it. So I was like, "Bing," that's what it is. It just connects them. It was a time in their life when
yeah,
they didn't have to worry about anything else. These guys were bigger than life. You could actually go and meet them if you went to a house show or see them like that. And I say, yeah, it's not necessarily me. It's just that I was a part of it. And then me doing the event center and me doing those matches and stuff
yeah.
that was part of it. And that's really just been wonderful. And that's why I
You
love
know,
what these
Sean, it
shows
was
have
the
become.
same. It was the same thing with me. I never used to go to the events like that. I didn't go. I said, why would they want me to go there? And why?
Right.
And I was out of the business. All of a sudden, my wife says, "Why don't you go one time? Maybe you like it. Okay, so I went once. She came back. I said, it was fun. I
Yeah.
said, so many people, they were like, you can see the parents that were there, like when I was wrestling, they'd have their kids. They said, I used to see him wrestle you back with the
Yeah.
Rockers and the Heart Foundation. And so many people, like you said, they come in as thanks for the memories.
Huh.
It's like, well, thank you for the memories. Without them, we wouldn't have been there either.
No.
But it's just, it's a whole different thing. I thought it would have been like clawing and this and that. Back
Yeah.
in the day, you go to the ring,
And
you'd
they
be
don't care. You're going to
around.
be sitting at a table like,
Yeah,
but
but it's
no.
so respectful and
Yeah.
so gratifying. Every time I come back now, and I don't do a lot of these,
Right.
no, because I want to when I go out, I want it to be fun,
Yeah.
because I don't have to do them. I do it because I'm going to have fun. And
Yeah.
so when I go out, I'll do maybe one or two a year, you know, but when I go out, I come back. Well, I look forward to it. And when I see the fans, it's not because I've been to a few. I've seen some of the guys like you should take a few breaks here because it's like, uh,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like, they seem so miserable. For me, it's like, hey, how are you doing?
Yeah.
I saw you one time. I said, yes, yes. And then they bring up the
The
match, and yeah,
stories.
all those
Yeah.
are fun. It's just so much fun,
Yeah.
and that's the way it's going to be in Gatineau. It's so much fun. The fans are there, and they're going to be thrilled to see you, Sean.
No.
As I am. I'm
Yeah.
going to be thrilled to
It's
see
going to be
you.
great. And I know there may be a little heat. We got Harry Smith coming. Davy Boy Smith is his junior is his kind of ring name, but he's going to be there. And Jacques, I know he's been training, looking
Yep.
good. He's going to
Yeah.
get in, and there's for this Royal Rumble, I believe. So it Could be
Well,
interesting. It's
it's
going to
going
be.
that it's going to be interesting because people say, "Oh, sports entertainment, this and that." Like we mentioned a little earlier, it's not all friends backstage, and who knows what he's carrying from back in the
Yeah,
day.
yeah,
You don't know what's going on in a person's head. We've seen
that's right.
people do crazy things in this
Yeah.
world.
Yep.
Who knows what's going on in his
Yeah,
head?
we're gonna have to wait to find out, folks. And
Yeah,
you
could it
have
be
the
he's
chance to
going to
be
come in
there.
and want to
Yeah.
do something, go back? I got even from what happened back then.
That's
Who
right.
knows? You
Yeah.
know, so
Yeah. It's gonna be
I,
fun.
it's there's a little question mark about
Yeah.
that.
And if you're anywhere near the area, and that doesn't matter which side of the border you're on, you got to check it out. It's happening in Gatineau, Quebec, on Friday, Saturday, May 30th. I'm going to be there. Raymond Rougeau, the Fabulous Rougeau Brothers, is going to be there. It's going to be awesome. But man, I'm so glad we had a chance to have this conversation, Raymond, and I'm
Sean,
really looking forward
my
to seeing
brother
you.
asked me, I'm gonna be I'm gonna be close by watching that because I know that my brother told me there's been also with the Dynamite kid's daughter.
Daughter, yeah, they had
There's
a podcast and
there's some pretty good animosity going on there. And with
still,
Davy Boy's son, like we said, there's expect the unexpected, maybe.
yeah.
So I'm gonna be close by also. And like I'll have his back like I did back in 1988.
I can't wait to see you, bro.
What's funny is when Vince came up to me and offered me to become an announcer or
Yeah.
interviewer when I started, I was like, I never had any formal training for this. I don't know how, I could try, but I don't. He said, you'll do fine. I did it for 17 years.
Isn't that crazy? It's
My
yeah.
wrestling career lasted 18 and a half years.
Yeah.
My commentating career lasted 17 years. Now my political career, it's been 24 and a half years.
Jeez. What a life. What a
It's
life.
amazing. Amazing.
That's
My
something.
seventh term as an elected official.
Yeah. That's awesome. Not,
Never
not,
would have thought it.
not many can say that.
You see how life can just open opportunities?
Yeah.
You just have to seize them.
But I think the reason it worked that way for you is because you always did it your way. I mean,
Yeah.
you always got to make the choices. You didn't leave it up
Yeah.
to others. And I think
Yeah.
that's the key. All right, Ray. I will see you soon, man. Thank you so
Yes.
much.
Thank you, Sean.
All
Take
right.
care.
Be well. See ya.
Bye-bye.